We've got a few minutes left and we want to talk about tax. Scotland's Finance Secretary says she may have to revisit a promise not to raise income tax in Scotland before the next election. Shona Robson warned that she faces a possible nightmare situation where funding from Westminster could fall by £1 billion due to decisions the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, could be making in her budget in a couple of weeks' time. Anas Sarwar's also been pushed on the budget, and actually I'm going to play you both, Shona Robson and then Anas Sarwar, and then we'll sort of discuss how the parties are shaping up when it comes to messaging around the budget. First of all, then Shona Robson.
Any money raised from income tax, for example, if it was invested in public services, we would receive consequential funding for that. So there could be a bit of a balancing there. But if at the same time she cuts national insurance contributions, then that will reduce the money to the Treasury. And of course, that's not recognised or accounted for as part of the fiscal framework. And therefore, it would reduce Scotland's funding because there's less money going to the Treasury, so less consequentials. So that is the kind of nightmare situation for Scotland. And of course, that's not one that we want to see. And that is why we need that engagement, because I can't believe a UK Labour government would want to actively cut Scotland's funding by £1 billion. That would be an extraordinary set of circumstances. We don't want to raise taxes. Of course, we had already set out in the tax strategy that we wanted to see that stability till the end of the Parliament. But in the event of unforeseen exceptional circumstances, clearly we would have to potentially revisit that. So we are looking at all of the scenarios, all of the options here. Look, on a personal level, I do have some sympathy. It is an incredibly difficult job, but, you know, she has boxed herself in here with her self-imposed fiscal rules. She gave herself a wafer-thin level of protection through, the headroom. It was tiny. It was tiny, and any movement was going to completely sweep that away. And that, of course, is what has happened.
And straight then to Anas Sarwar, the Scottish Labour leader, being challenged by Colin Mackay on STV.
Will you be speaking to the Chancellor in the next few weeks ahead of the budget? Will you be speaking to the Chancellor?
I speak to the Chancellor regularly.
Will you be speaking to the Chancellor or the Prime Minister in the next couple of weeks ahead of the budget?
Well, of course, I speak to the Chancellor and the Prime Minister regularly. I know there's lots of speculation about the budget, but going back to the point you were making earlier on.
We'll be talking to the Chancellor over the next couple of weeks. What are you going to be trying to influence her on?
Well, the key parts for what we're looking for from the Chancellor is I've made clear to them in public and in private that this has to be an unashamedly Labour budget. It has to be recognising that there might be difficult decisions to make. Any of those difficult decisions have to be rooted in fairness and in Labour values so we can get the outcomes we want.
But what specifically will you be lobbying higher in income tax?
Well, income tax, is a tax that is set in Scotland.
Yes.
Scotland decides income tax.
And if she increases income tax by 2p, the Fraser Allender Institute reckon it would cost over £1 billion. If you were in government next year, it would cost you over £1 billion from your government budget. So are you going to lobby her on that?
I'm not going to speculate on.
I'm not asking you to speculate. I'm asking you to tell me whether you lobby her or not.
Income tax in England and Wales
I'm not asking
is a matter for the Chancellor.
I'm absolutely not asking you to speculate.
Scotland is decided by the Finance Secretary.
I'm not asking you to speculate.
I'm answering your question. The person that's advocating for income tax rise in England and Wales is John Swinney, and he's the man that negotiated the fiscal framework.
So you can't tell me right now whether you will lobby the Chancellor on that or not?
So I'm making clear they have to be Labour choices, but it would be inappropriate.
I'm asking you your choice.
No. That is the fierce and fearless Colin Mackay with Anas Sarwar. Was there a better answer he could have given? I suppose, Jetty. I mean, what would he have lost if he'd said, yeah, I am lobbying the Chancellor on behalf of Scotland? Is the risk then that he loses out if she doesn't give him anything, I suppose?
Well, you've just answered your own question.
Yeah, fine, sorry.
I'm lobbying her hard to ensure she doesn't administer a £1 billion cut in Scotland, and then when she does, it's like, well, that worked, didn't it? I'm really powerful standing up for Scotland. I mean, it's a manna from heaven for the SNP. No, Colin Mackay's, you can't help but smile and listen to him. He's brilliant, and to be fair to him, he gives it the same to every party. Yes, there's no doubt. But look, I'm going to defer shortly to Andy Maciver, who I believe put in a really interesting proposal about how the SNP could actually outfox not just Labour here, but potentially a bit of a reform vote. Because if you could come to a position, find the savings, and maybe even just have a 1p increase next to what is predicted to be a 2p increase by the UK, then you might find yourself in a situation where you can say you're giving Scotland the lowest level local basic income tax, and that would be quite something going into the election. But Andy, with that introduction, over to you, my friend.
Moving me from the BBC onto tax, my watch has just told me my heart rate spiked here. Good from Colin Mackay, and he's not from the BBC, and yet we can still trust him to ask questions. Anyway, there you go. Look,
don't get me.
Just very briefly on Anas Sarwar, right? Very briefly on Anas Sarwar.
Yep.
I've heard that interview by Anas Sarwar multiple times a year for 25 years, given by Tory leaders and Labour leaders, because their job, whether they like it or not, is to be the first line of defence for whatever's going on at Westminster. Broken record, sorry, but that's just the way it is. If they don't like it, then they should leave. The most dispiriting thing, I think, is hearing Shona Robison describe this as a nightmare scenario. I think it's not a nightmare scenario. I think it's a dream scenario. And I said it briefly last week about this 2 up, 2 down proposal that seems to be making its way through from the Resolution Foundation. So just to recap, you put income tax up by 2 pence. You put national insurance down by 2 pence. So workers basically find themselves with no difference in their take-home pay. But because income tax is a broader tax, it's paid for by more people than pay national insurance, you raise a little bit of money. Now, what that does in Scotland is, because income tax is devolved, nothing happens to Scottish income tax. It's up to Scotland. But national insurance is reserved. So if Reeves cuts national insurance, suddenly, if nothing else happens, everybody in Scotland who works gets a 2 pence tax cut. Now, isn't that just absolutely fabulous? The problem is that it leads to a block grant cut of about £1 billion. So at that point, the Scottish Government has to say to itself, OK, I have options here. I could give everybody a tax cut, and if I want to still keep everything the same, I need to find £1 billion in savings. Or I could put everybody's tax up by 2 pence and keep everything pretty much broadly the same as it is just now. Now, that is absolutely what I expect them to do. I expect them to take that way out and say, we're putting up by 2 pence, but we're not breaking our manifesto pledge. This is all London's fault. It's not exactly a playbook that we haven't heard before, and I think that's what they'll do. But I absolutely think that they should not do that. I think they should hold income tax steady, allow national insurance to be cut, and give everybody a 2 pence tax cut before an election. Because I think that we are in a situation now where the independence movement has the most important 5 years it's ever had coming up. I think this is more important than the run-up to and the referendum, because we're going to be in a situation where there's going to be a strong SNP-led government at Holyrood, led by John Swinney, and a very possible Nigel Farage government at Westminster. And lots of people who voted no the last time will be having a look at the Scottish Government and the SNP and saying, I wonder if they're my way out. But they will not be the way out if they look like they can't run an economy. And you can't run an economy if you continually just want to provide sweeties from the sweetie jar all the time. If you can't make 1.5%, that's all it is. £1 billion is 1.5% of what they spend. If you can't make 1.5% of savings and give everybody a signal that Scotland's a place you can live, work and do business in an entrepreneurial way, then they're not going to achieve their dream, and they won't deserve to either.
Well said, that man. Can I just add one point? When I said 1 point, and I'm perhaps giving my too much credit to my former colleagues in the SNP, but do you think that they're playing the old cute game of, this is tough going, guys, this is really tough, and we'll have to work, we're looking at all options, and then John Swinney pulls out the mother of all rabbits out the hat, does what Andy's saying, and goes into the election pretty buoyed? Yes or no?
I hope yes, but I think no, because look, we do know, guys, that lots of people who are now in the Scottish Government, in the Swinney-Forbes government, didn't agree with the last round of tax rises that the Scottish Government put in place. We know that. We know they felt it was too high, the gap with England was getting too large, and it was putting people off. You know, the top rate tax is raised next to nothing, and all it does is send a signal that Scotland's not a good place to do business. We're struggling to attract lots and lots of workers, including public sector workers like consultant doctors, for instance, who the BMA have said we're struggling to attract because of the high rate taxes. But the past behaviour is the best indicator of future behaviour, and this Scottish Government is not a tax-cutting government, it's a tax-raising government. It's a high-spending government. It thinks that spending money is the answer to problems. And it would take a reversal in that central ethos for them to do what I and you have suggested, Geoff. And for that reason, I'm not convinced they will.